Yeah, alright guys.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Andy.
Welcome to Game Couch. Alright guys, so today we're going to bring you something a little bit different. We're going to have a history lesson.
That's right. This Tuesday the new Tombe Raider reboot comes out, so we figured we would do the same as we did with Halo 4 and give you a rundown of the series so far. You know, just in case you've been absent-minded for the past 18 years.
Fucking hell, has it been that long?
18 years.
Also, it's worth mentioning that we're only going to be talking about the games. I think everybody will agree that the movies should be forgotten about.
Completely buried.
Burned then buried?
Anyway, shall we crack on?
Indeed. The first ever Tomb Raider, developed by Core Design, introduced the world to the English action archaeologist Lara Croft back in the days of the PlayStation 1, Sega Saturn and of course PC. It was actually one of the games that helped push the PlayStation's success, as everyone wanted to have a go at controlling this new busty action heroine. Tomb Raider's plot revolved around collecting ancient and possibly supernatural artifacts whilst avoiding a shadowy group intent on using the artifacts for evil. While the plot itself is pretty much a hugely over-the-top version of Indiana Jones, never thought I'd say that out loud, it was carried off with a combination of explorative puzzle-solving gameplay and some third-person shooting. It was widely praised by critics for revolutionary graphics, inventive gameplay, a brilliant soundtrack and engaging story. Players, however, weren't so keen on the lack of action. Lara herself was praised for breaking the usual perspective of male action heroes, but also criticised for being a stereotypical and rather sexist view of women to pander to male audiences. But whatever your opinion was, her level of attention was unheard of. Tomb Raider established itself as one of the most groundbreaking games of all time, and a sequel was pretty much inevitable.
Lara returned in Tomb Raider 2 once again to hunt for mysterious artifacts and prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. At least that's the basic version. The game brought forth some new guns to the table, new moves and some vehicles for the even larger environments. There was also a much larger collection of baddies, mostly human this time. The core mechanics of the game remained the same though, climbing around, jumping and solving puzzles to continue the story. Some of the puzzles were a bit less obvious, making the game a tad more difficult. A new addition to the game was an expanded version of Lara's mansion, featuring an assault course where you could go and climb, and the player could really get to grips with Lara's moves, in a very safe environment with no baddies. The butler featured too, an elderly chap who followed the player around, rattling tea and groaning and occasionally farting. I'm sure many of you had lots of fun locking the poor sod in the freezer. Tomb Raider 2's overall reception was positive. It was praised for having bigger levels, bumped up graphics and a much curvier Lara model. However, the game was criticised for having too many enemies and action pieces, but overall the people simply considered Tomb Raider 2 to be as good as the first, but not necessarily better.
The third Tomb Raider game in as many years picked up after the events of Tomb Raider 2 and sees Lara on her third trek across the world hunting for buried treasures. Her semi-automatic pistols were replaced with Desert Eagles, as if she wasn't badass enough already, and her moveset was expanded once again, allowing her to monkey swing on bars, sprint and crouch. Not exactly innovative compared to modern games, but at the same time it was a very welcome addition. Another change was that after the first few levels, the player could actually pick and choose where they wanted to go next in whatever order they desired, giving a more unique playthrough. The settings of the game were a bit more modernised, however, and there was very little in the way of tomb raiding in comparison to the previous instalments, but the basic mechanics still remained the same. In some areas, it was better to sneak past enemies rather than fight them, but again, this was left to the player to decide. Some other features included quicksand, freezing water, which Lara could die in if you were there for too long. This meant that vehicles like motorboats and kayaks were necessary for traversing some levels. Once again, the graphics were buffed and Lara's mansion hugely expanded to include a racetrack and target range, and it was the biggest version of the mansion so far, and included a secret treasure room containing artifacts from the previous adventures. It wouldn't be seen again until Tomb Raider Legends, which we'll get to later. The game itself was a bestseller here in the UK and received generally positive reviews, but was criticised for a lack of true innovation and considered it to be a little more than an expansion of the previous games and not the groundbreaking epic that the first one had been.
In the fourth installment of the series, we see Lara as a teenager, and we learn one or two things about her past that we'd never known before. This time the main story is Lara attempted to correct a mistake from her early years, trying to return a dark god to imprisonment, but once again there is a mercenary group intent on getting the amulet for themselves. She just can't get away from evil billionaire scientists, can she?
No.
At all. The game was left on a bit of a cliffhanger and the player was left believing that Lara had been killed, which caused a little bit of controversy amongst the fans. This time Lara's new moveset included the ability to shimmy around corners, climb ropes, and even use them to swing across large distances. Levels had more than one route, once again giving the player a little bit more freedom of how they wanted to approach the game. Within her inventory, Lara could also combine items and weapons, such like laser sights to guns, blah 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 blah. Thanks to the graphics update as well, Lara had a much smoother, more realistic appearance, if you could call her massive tits and tiny waist realistic, to be honest. And once again, the game was well received and was said to hark back to the original.
The fifth game begins just a few days after the fourth one and featured very little in terms of improvement from the previous installment, adding the ability to walk on tight ropes, grab and swing from horizontal bars, and jump into a somersault from a crouch, and that was about it. There was a bit of a graphics update, but no update on Lara's body model. On the PC version, there was a level editor included, which fans could use to make their own fun areas to traverse. It was a tad restrictive though, and it didn't take long for the fans to start tweaking it. In terms of reception, however, Chronicles received very mixed reviews, many complaining that it was too short and not trying hard enough in terms of innovation, and was described as being a bit dated, and believed to be the poorest game in the series so far.
Angel of Darkness would be the first Tomb Raider game to be launched on the PS2, and continues the story directly from the fourth and fifth one, where Lara is trying to clear her name of being accused of killing her former mentor. Lara could now backflip, army crawl, super jump after a sprint, and could also perform hand-to-hand combat. There was also a number of RPG elements introduced into the game. One of the biggest changes was a grip meter. If this ran out, Lara would fall and die. This means completing some climbs requires strength upgrades. The RPG side also included some dialogue options in the cutscenes. These actually didn't change the outcome of the story, but did change how you got there. It felt slightly tacked on, but it was just another way for the developers to include choice in the game, like they had previously with the alternate routes. The player could control a character besides Lara. Albeit short and at the very late stage in the game, the new character was called Curtis Trent, and he wasn't particularly important enough for anybody to be overly bothered about him. Darkness once again suffered from a very bad reception. While it offered plenty of exploration and an intriguing story, its controls were awkward and annoying, and somehow the developers failed in many of the aspects of the gameplay, making climbing, combat and stealth very difficult to master. Fans caused core design head Mr. Jeremy Heath Smith to resign. EIDOS took production from the Tomb Raider games away from core design and handed them to Crystal Dynamics. Core design disappeared in 2006, and it seemed that Lara Croft had really been killed off this time. It would truly take something special to bring her back.
Crystal Dynamics took up the challenge and brought us Tomb Raider Legend. It was released across several consoles, including the GameCube and for the first time the Xbox 360. In this one, Lara searches for a mysterious artifact and bumps into some mercenaries who want it for themselves.
Of course you did.
If I was her, I would have given up and done something a bit less life-threatening. It really is getting beyond a joke now. Obviously, the game received a graphics update. Lara retained her moveset from all the previous installments, but the RPG elements were no longer present. The game was a huge success. Critics and fans alike were pleased to find that Crystal Dynamics had fixed the control issues, making Lara's movements and jumps more natural and dynamic. The only issues were that it was considered to be a tad too short and the combat still needed tweaking. Lara, however, had incredibly and successfully been resurrected from the dead.
Tree was quite simply a remake of the first game.
Finish it off then.
It was made on the Tomb Raider Legends engine, albeit slightly improved. Lara retained her new movesets and all of the environments from the first game had been upgraded with graphics and sound. In 360, this game was released in episodic downloadable content, and a full disc version was released later on the same year. The game was incredibly well received, even more so than Legend, and had been described as being better than the original, because Crystal Dynamics had fixed a lot of the bugs and the control issues. It was now one of the few instances where a game remake had been better than the original.
With Lara's mansion exploding and then rewinds to a week earlier to follow on from Legends. Its main focus is on Lara attempting to find items from Norse mythology such as Thor's hammer, and at the same time fighting off, wait for it, yep, mercenaries. Yay! Underworld featured some impressive environments and dynamic lighting to make full use of the technology of the time. Lara's animations were also created using motion capture to make her appear even more realistic than before. There were plenty of puzzles to solve, places to explore. Combat was still a bit dodgy though, despite the developers' attempt at fixing it. It was critically praised across all platforms, except for the PlayStation 2 and the Wii versions, which were embarrassingly trashed by critics. EIDOS, however, did try and keep any scores below an 8 out of 10 from being released prior to the game coming out, which does make you think a bit. Anyway, it sold well and did the series justice, at least in my opinion.
Exclusive, Guardian of Light is the first game not to wear the Tomb Raider title. A shooter with the emphasis on co-op gameplay. Either Lara or a Mayan warrior named Totek. The main story is a non-linear arcade-style game to prevent an evil spirit from getting his hands on an ancient artifact and using it to destroy the world. Mercenaries thrown in there as well, but you'd already guessed that, hadn't you? They've pretty much just become part of the backdrop.
Yeah.
And the players can use each other's items to traverse the world and complete the puzzles. But in the single player, the campaign features slightly altered puzzles, so the player can actually control Lara and do the game without relying on the AI. On teamwork, an interesting new take on the series' signature style gained high praise from the critics, with only one complaint being that the story was a little bit too ridiculous. Yeah, that made me laugh a little bit as well. But it sold very well, and it was a very, very interesting addition to the Tomb Raider story.
Right, so there you have it, a bit of a comprehensive guide on all the Tomb Raider games on the console so far. We hope you enjoyed it, we hope you found it informative. I'm very much looking forward to the reboot, so we'll bring you our verdict on that one soon enough.
It might be the first game I've bought for a while.
Yeah.
Anyway, cheers for watching. Please check out our other stuff, and don't forget to subscribe.
If you've got any comments on the video if you've seen, or you've got any games that you want us to cover in the future, please stick it in the comment section below. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter.
See you later.
Bye.